Be live. Hi everybody, we're just waiting a couple of minutes while we get all our participants in, and then we'll welcome you to the RCA Service Design Whip Show Liveable Planet program. Thanks a lot. Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm sure there will be a few more people joining us in a moment, but I'd like to welcome you to the RCA Service Design Class of 2022 Whip Show, Work in Progress Show. And tonight's session is on the Liveable Planet, an array of projects looking at sustainability, environment, and how we can keep our planet livable. I'm going to give you a short introduction to the whole program and the student projects that we're showcasing over these next 3 days. And then I'll be handing over to our head of Liveable Planet, Richard Atkinson, and the students. And you'll be getting a chance to talk directly to them in breakout rooms a little bit later on. So as I say, welcome to this Work in Progress show. This has been yet again still a challenging time for the students on this course, but we're really delighted to have this online presentation of the work of our 3 challenge labs and celebrate not only the class of 2022 but also the 10th anniversary of the course. Started in 2012 by Nick de Leon. We've had 8 years of cohort, but 10 years of study on the course. The 2-year master's course, and every year a new cohort of students has gone out and transformed the world a little bit. So as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the start of the course, we also celebrate the launch of the next 10 years. And some of that will be shared with you during this session. If we look back to 2021, then in June, when we last had a series of events, we were graduating the class of 2021, which fantastically we were able to do live in the Albert Hall in the Grand Tradition. And actually we'll shortly be holding a live convocation for the class of 2020, who of course weren't able to have their convocation. So we're very excited to be seeing our students again when they return for that. But this term, it has been great to welcome students back to the college, and just about everybody is now studying again on campus. We have some students still distributed around the world, and so we're working in this hybrid mode, which turns out has lots of advantages on all fronts, but it's been great to welcome students back into the campus. Just to remind you, our definition of service design And what we do, it's the design of the intangible, but it's human-centered, which is not the same as user-centered. We want to understand all the humanity involved in the delivery of a service, those who take part in it, those who are affected by it. We use design methods, we visualize, we prototype, we experiment, and many other methods as well, from behavioral science to agile and lean. We are concerned with systems. How do we change systems? How do we improve them? How do we help them work better for people and for the planet? And as in every act of design, there is a deep bias to do something, to take action. And Richard will be explaining that in more detail in the context of these projects on Liveable Planet. So this year, we are launching 3 challenge labs. Now, these challenge labs are platforms for student projects, yes, for a series of amazing talks that we've been holding, especially around the Liveable Planet Challenge Lab, and for future research and collaboration with different partners. So we are launching 3: social impact, there'll be an event tomorrow, Liveable Planet, here we are today, and life services, which at the moment encompasses our partnership with EY Seren and the future financial and health services. I'll have more about that in a second. What are challenge labs and why? Well, we fundamentally believe that the principles we use in designing services are valuable in creating actionable, impactful and inclusive solutions to global challenges. That's what we've seen right from the start of this course 10 years ago, whether it's with commerce, whether it's with government, whether it's with societal problems, we're there fixing them. So the challenge labs are there to focus partnerships and showcase our progress. We're setting these up as a collection point, a platform to share knowledge and research. So they're there to collaborate, and they're there to take action on the issues of our times. And if any of you want to come and take part in our challenge labs, if you want to come on us with this journey, whether it's setting a project, whether it's collaborating with other organizations and setting up great talks or doing great research, come and talk to us, as many indeed are at the moment. Liveable Planet, the one we're focusing on today, is about building and testing those practical solutions to these enormous threats. Social impact is about understanding how design can unlock the power of neighborhoods, of people, of communities, the single biggest unit of societal change. And life services is about providing agency so that we manage our future economic, our physical and mental well-being. So in September of this year, we launch our new 1-year course, compressing everything we've been doing in the last 10 years over a 2-year master's course to 1 year. So these challenge labs will bring us those projects, will bring us the partnerships that are at the heart of how we teach service design at the RCA. So our 3 with social impact, Liveable Planet, EY Seren and life services will be complemented by others, financial services, healthcare, ethical data and policy. And by September, we should have most of these in place, delivering projects into our next cohort of students. Over these next few days, we will be talking, as well as Liveable Planet, we will be looking at projects on social impact with the Ministry of Justice and an organisation called Catch 22. And we have 3 student projects that look at probation and the unnecessarily huge number of prisoners that go back to prison during their probationary period through some small oversight in the process of their probation period. It's not fair, it's not right, and all the parties involved want to do something about it. With life services, we're working with EY Seren and Nationwide, and we've been asking, why do I make such terrible financial decisions? Why people are incapable or find it tough to think ahead, to save, to invest, to look after their future selves, and how we can humanize the kind of digital platforms that are helping people manage their finances. But today it's the time of circularity, heat pumps, EV charge points, and service design. And we're talking about by far the most popular set of projects that the students undertook in the term from October to December, coinciding, of course, with COP26 in Glasgow, and their passion to see how we can design for planet, beyond sustainability and create a livable planet, which is my opportunity to hand over to Richard Atkinson, who will tell you in more detail about the projects you're going to see. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Clive. Yeah, let me share this as well. Yeah, welcome along, everybody. Hopefully you can see that my screen is not very clear, but I think you can now see an image of some buildings. So what are we going to do today? What is ahead of us for the next hour or so? I'm going to talk to you fairly briefly about this lab and what we're doing, what the point of it is, and what our plans are for it. And then I'm going to let the students take over, and they have each in teams made a film summarising their project and what it's all about and the contribution it's trying to make to the massive problems we're all facing. And then there's a small element of very voluntary audience participation, where we're going to invite everyone who's not involved in this course to come and meet and talk to the students in a number of breakout rooms. And we'll give you about 15 minutes or so you could perhaps go to 2 rooms in that time if you're feeling like a wander between them. And then at the end, probably not a huge amount of time to do it, but for the last 15 minutes or so, we're going to bring everyone back together into this space, and at that point just have a more general discussion about where service design fits into this enormous challenge that we're facing. So actually I might just get some thoughts going in the chat. If you're able to have a think about how prepared would you say designers are for dealing with the problems facing the planet? And you could put a number out of 10 if you like, or just a sort of phrase or two. But it'd be really interesting just to get a sense from everybody, particularly people who are not on this course. How prepared do you feel designers are for dealing with these problems around the planet? So I'm going to build on that question just by talking through what this lab is trying to do. We named this lab, I'd say, at least half a dozen times. It was called Sustainability Lab, various other things along the way. But we didn't want to call it something to do with carbon or the climate crisis, because it is bigger than that. If that isn't sort of too mind-bending an idea, it is for me. We want to look, obviously, at this urgent issue of how we reduce our carbon emissions, but also to look at the converging crises around that as well, the other ways that the planet is under threat. So to recognise that actually the loss of certain species or pollution may be as big an issue for many communities and for our sort of general well-being, for the state of the planet, as it is to manage carbon. So we're sort of looking at all aspects of the planetary boundaries. But this year, obviously, the sort of big conversation has been around COP and around the climate crisis. So a lot of what we've been trying to do is look at briefs which have this focus. And I've been involved in work around this area for a long time, well over a decade. My interest, I have to say, and my sort of sense of optimism has kind of gone up and down in that time. And I think one of the things by joining this course, I've realised is my optimism about actually our potential to solve it has increased by thinking about the specific role that service designers can play in it. Because I think the problem we have at the moment is that we have an awful lot of targets and we have an awful lot of very headline plans. So X number of EV charging points and X number of electronic vehicles in the UK by 2030. This number of heat pumps by 2030. This reduction in the amount of waste that comes out of people's homes. We have a lot of targets, but what we don't have is a way of actually thinking, well, how do you encourage and cajole and sometimes push and occasionally force and legislate people to do these actions? We know where we're going, but the journey there, I think, is really undeveloped. So this quote from Aditya Chakrabarty from The Guardian, to me, captures what this problem is, that we have all these targets, but actually the work of getting there is very finicky. It's not necessarily about having new technological inventions. We have a lot of those. It's about how do you get those inventions to actually fit into the sort of the nature of everyday life. How do you get people to understand a heat pump and install it in their house in a way that actually means they will use it to reduce their carbon and save themselves money? How do you put all these EV charging places suddenly into a city and not put them in the wrong places, or put them into the places that only benefit the richest people? These are some very sort of knotty human problems, and they're the kinds of problems that I think service design, among other things, is really well positioned to help solve. So what we've been trying to do is define, okay, this is a huge challenge. Almost every area of the world is going to be working on this, but what can service design do particularly well, and how can we communicate this to other people? And I think there's four things, four tools almost, or four ways of looking at the world that service design has that can really make a difference. The first is this human-centeredness, which Clive mentioned, and not in the sense of trying to do everything to benefit humans. Actually, a big part of our role here is to help humans to step back and not put their own interests first. But to do those things, we need to understand all our human foibles. We need to understand all our ambitions and our cultural connections and all the ways we work in our everyday habits to actually bring about these changes. The second thing that service design can be very good at is systems thinking, and looking at the way that perhaps a design which is intended to do one thing actually has all kinds of unintended consequences. And you'll see that in some of the projects we look at today, how the process that teams went through was to come up with a prototype, but then to realize that actually this could have very worrying consequences if they didn't think through how it fitted into a whole cultural system, or a whole political system, or a whole network of how businesses interact. And then the third thing is this bias to action, which Clive touched upon. And in this world where we're trying, we're talking a lot about the changes we might make, this tendency to make and to prototype and to try things out, which service design has had at its heart all its life, I feel is really, really important. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that a lot of the time we're asking people to choose between futures that they haven't experienced. We're asking people to make changes where they don't know how big a sacrifice it will be. And what a prototype, what a potential design does, is it allows people to live with something and try something and react to something. And I think that's a real role that service design can bring, is to bring ideas into people's lives and let them play with and try them out. And then the last thing connected to that is, it is a great way to try things and fail safely. So it's all about not necessarily taking a huge approach and saying I have the finished intervention here. It's about trying lots of things, failing, iterating, moving on, and that process, which is very natural, it becomes very natural in service designers, is incredibly helpful, I think, for trying to find our way through this path quickly. So we're really excited about this lab. We think there's a lot of things that service design can do and we can tell the world about, but we're also sort of very aware of its limitations as well. So today we're going to look at all these sort of highfalutin ideas in practice. What does it actually mean when you've got a brief? And the students have taken that and applied that to five, in fact, really interesting challenges. Under the heading of EV charging, we have 6 different projects. So, yeah, the most popular project of the year. These were all from an initiative which the Department of Transport and appointed PA Consulting and the RCA to design a new charge point, which some of you might have seen. And this brief was to say, right, we have a charge point. How do we actually bring this out into cities and towns and rural areas around Britain and make sure that it's used in ways that are impactful and equitable? And so we've got 6 projects that you'll see briefly looking at that brief. Second was a fantastically open brief from Adidas saying, how would we reimagine Adidas for a circular economy? We've got 4 really interesting responses to that very open question. Some of them are quite challenging, I think, for a company that's used to working the way Adidas does. We have a project which was initiated by some fantastic people at Bulb, which has had a lot of problems recently, so they've had to step back, and this is no longer a Bulb project, so please ignore any Bulb branding or anything that's on there. But the project has been taken on a level by Jonathan, who was working on it, and he's looked at really interesting ways that people might be persuaded to think about heat pumps differently by starting to think differently about heat in their homes, and he's got some really interesting innovations there to explore. And then 2 other projects with just a single person or small team. Sfera, which is Ari Fusup's project, comes from a brief to try to help service designers to see through all the potential greenwashing that goes on around carbon zero, and to work out where can they really have impact. And that's an ongoing project where he's developing tools that people can use in the future. And then lastly, another live project by Disha and Chet, which is looking at how organizations can track their carbon footprint down their supply chain, which is potentially obviously a very, very difficult thing to do. And it's about using new technology, blockchain most obviously, to be able to analyze what your impact is and to measure that accurately down to perhaps very small businesses and people a long way away from your organization. And that is excitingly a finalist in the Johnny Ive and Prince Charles Terracotta competition. So congratulations to them. So I'm going to ask everybody now, maybe just to have a quick look at those, or try to keep those names in mind. I mean, it's a strange version of Kim's game potentially, but when you watch as you're watching the films, keep an eye out for whose project it was that caught your attention, because when we come back after watching the films, you'll get the chance to go and see those people in different rooms. So yeah, keep an eye out for who these people are. So I am going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to remind people in the chat as well, if people want to put in any thoughts there or any sort of questions as they come along, that's very welcome as well. I'm now going to share with you though the films. Do shout out if the sound doesn't work, because that is always a potential problem. Sorry, with you. One sec.
Not seeing your screen at the moment, Richard.
You should any second, I think. How about now?
Now it's showing. Lovely.
Awesome. Okay, let's make that larger. So yeah, 12 films from the students looking at this massive and exciting and terrifying area.
Climate change is a major issue, demanding immediate measures to take concrete action. We worked with Adidas on their goal to achieve a circular experience by 2025 with their 3-loop strategy that emphasizes on using recyclable material, ensuring they're circular, and where not, can be returned to nature with minimal harm. We asked, what does it mean to be truly sustainable? Research indicates that optimally using what is already manufactured is the most sustainable, limiting creation of waste, loss of material, and energy consumed to remanufacture. This is Adidas React, a service that provides concrete and actionable methods to extend product lifecycle. It redefines the meaning of sustainability in the sports industry, making it visible, doable, accessible, and inclusive. Repair supplies tools and equipment for cleaning, polishing, and mending for items you want to keep. Relive provides resources and accessories like cutoffs, buttons, and paint to customize the product's appearance. Reclaim, a facility to return items you no longer want. And finally, Reshare, to buy secondhand or borrow items you don't own. These interconnected sub-services optimize product lifecycle within Adidas's existing ecosystem. Here we are, leveraging the brand's influence to bring communities together, shifting mindset towards consumption, creating memorable experiences, and prolonging the life of your product and the world. Let's react together with Adidas.
For better disciplined purchasing behavior, also to actually see the environmental impact of our consumption, Adidas Infinity is a data visualization wardrobe service that directly supports manageable fashion consumption and brings joys through gamification.
While our customers can better manage their overconsumption, their avatars in your service enjoy more digital fashions, which also accelerate their personal well-being and better understanding of the environment through Adidas' existing assets, such as sports engagement, brick-and-mortar stores, and their market power.
Hi, we're Dr. O from Liveable Planning Challenge Lab. We cooperate with PA Consulting to deliver a service for UK charging points. You may hear they design a new on-street charger, but are you ready to move into the EV era? A lot of people say no due to the charging anxiety, which means worry about the long charging hours or uncertain about battery usage or infrastructure. However, what they know might not be the case, but misconceptions come from wrong comparisons. In charging process, people tend to compare with refueling petrol car in several minutes, but it is necessary and harmful to fully charge an EV. In this charging process, people feel nervous due to false battery color change, but usually 20% of the car battery is enough for daily commute. So what Dr. O want to do is to eliminate the information gap through step-by-step instructions. Firstly, raise people's awareness with an interesting master personality test and provide personalized charging tips. Secondly, customize a weekly charging plan based on users' actual need. Lastly, recommend the most suitable choice. Come with Dr. O to build a sustainable charging future.
Hi, let me tell you about our project EV. From our research, we found that councils use brute force methods in developing their EV charger rollout plans. This happens because they tend to work in isolation and they do not have resources that foster new connections between them. The impact of this is that it wastes time, money, and effort for councils. The value in sharing best practices across them is not realized, and a lack of resources prevents councils to learn from each other. So, how could we enable councils to network and share best practices? Introducing EV, a platform to connect councils based on relevance, facilitate communication and sharing of knowledge between them and relevant stakeholders. Here, councils can build their profiles, they can discover and learn from each other, and participate in roundtable discussions. This is what one of the councillors had to say.
I think the benefit is that it is council to council. Normally with something like this, if I've got some good news to share, I'll put it on LinkedIn because I want the world to know. But if I'm looking to ask for some advice or putting myself in a slight position of vulnerability, like we haven't got much budget, I want to do this, then I can see using this site a bit more because I would feel it's a closed community.
To meet the climate goals, over half of the cars on the UK's roads needs to be EVs by 2032. We intend to design a platform that will allow residents to apply for the installation of public charging points. The platform will act as a bridge between the resident and the council. Although most UK councils already have similar application channels, different councils have different platforms, processes, and criteria, which causes confusion for users. In the service ecosystem built under the prototype and vision we have designed, users will be able to add an application directly on a map with a click, and the council will share the results of the data collection. Ultimately, users will have a unified platform for applications, communication, tracking progress, and viewing technical and legal constraints. We hope to convince councils to adopt this platform, with the potential benefits of increasing insightful feedback by weakening barriers of requesting and reducing the cost of dealing with users' inquiries and complaints, by increasing transparency of information. EV and potential EV users are very keen to cooperatively participate in the planning of public charging points. With proper guidance, people are immeasurably creative.
In line with the UK's ambitious target of a zero-carbon economy by 2050, Enjoy is here to support a full transition to electric vehicles. Even though the EV market has grown tremendously, non-EV users are still facing difficulties adopting and adapting to EVs. Among all non-EV users, the younger generation particularly lacks access to EVs. As a result of research, Enjoy aims to expose more rental EV opportunities with economic options, reduce learning barriers, and popularize EVs in the UK. To achieve this, Enjoy provides a shared platform to financially support users with additional rewards. An interactive system to adapt users to diverse EV models intuitively during journeys through iconic Enjoy identity. And community charging stations to offer approachable EV services and to increase the entire charging efficiency. Enjoy is envisioned to support diverse electric-powered devices with reliable mobile charging space in the zero-carbon world. Let's enjoy journey, enjoy.
Today, we are going to present you Sharing-Go, a ride-sharing service that uses charging piles as pickup points to help people with daily commuting. By summarizing the research, we identified two major problems: the high cost of public charging points and the pressure of peaking time, both for charging points and traffic. Putting all factors into consideration, we developed an idea of ride-sharing. Sharing-Go is a service that enables people to share ride during commute, leading us to a sustainable future with electric vehicles. Charge, share, change. Our design raises people's awareness to electric vehicles, building trust and connection in the community. Sharing-Go, shall we go?
It's 6 a.m. Wilfred woke up and realized,
holy mackerel, it's our anniversary day. I need to get a gift for my wife.
A notification came into his phone.
Your car has only 18% of battery left. Do you want to charge your car at one of these spots?
Wilfred opened the Waze app and contemplated.
How about also finding a flower shop on the way? Then I can collect some flowers.
Sure. Let me see. Oh, this charge point will be available for you at 12 p.m. And there is the flowery flower shop nearby. Do you want to book it?
Yes, please.
The charge will take 2 hours. Do you want to discover some more facilities and events nearby that you may be interested in?
Wilfred checked the list and found a nice cafe with good Wi-Fi. Then he saw an interesting ad about a local zero-carbon event.
Oh, wait, hang on. This Nature's Way mindfulness workshop looks interesting. Maybe I can take my wife there.
He checked the event in detail and decided to book 2 places via the meetup link. At 11:30 a.m., he left the house. He arrived at the charge point just before noon, parked his car and plugged in the iconic charger. He headed to the flower shop, picked up a nice bunch. Then he walked to the cafe and spent some time there working and having lunch. Wilfred received another notification at 5:02.
Your car has been charged to 80%. It's time to move.
He went to unplug the charger and got on with his life. At 5 p.m., Wilfred picked up his wife and gave her the flowers.
Honey, I have another surprise for you.
They arrived at the Nature Way workshop and spent a wonderful time together.
Thank you, Waze, you're a lifesaver.
T-Mode, the magic behind Waze for EV drivers, a real-time mobility platform powered by human-centered data.
Marvellous news out from RCA Service Design to look at how we heat our homes in the UK.
The British government wants us all to change our boilers for new green electric heat pumps. But there's a problem. British homes lose energy 3 times faster than the German and Swedish homes used to demonstrate the heat pump as a success. On top of that, most of us are not even aware of how much energy we lose in the winter through those drafty doors and leaky windows. So we've developed a service that will let you see where you're getting the chills. Bulk customers can guides and products to help reduce energy waste, saving money and the planet.
So you've had about, I'm calculating 120 weeks worth of work distilled into about 12 minutes of video. So there's obviously a lot of thinking, a lot of ideas behind what you've just seen. And yeah, what we'd love to do next is invite anyone who's from outside the course or outside the RCA to come and talk to some of the students who worked on these different projects. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little reminder, because obviously there's a lot of stuff there. We're all terribly aware of things like the recency effect and all that. So let me see. That's not the right thing to show, is it? I'm going to try to get you the list, but while I'm doing that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up breakout rooms for you guys to go into. I'm sorry, in the middle of an experiment and trying to do two things at once, to both think and talk. But yeah, we're going to set up breakout rooms. In those, there'll be, hopefully in all of them, but in most of them, there should be some of the students who worked on the project. They're very happy to sort of answer questions, to talk through, their work, but also to talk more generally about this issue of like, where does design play a role in solving the problems of the planet. If you, John, whilst I'm struggling to find that, or Clive, I don't know if you've got the slide with the list of project names that are on there.
Hi there. Yeah, so I just want to explain how this will work. Richard, you actually had the correct slide a second ago, so if you've got that one available, that would be fine. For the rest of you who may not be familiar with how this works, to get you into the breakout rooms with the students, at the bottom of your Zoom screen in the middle, there is a little icon with 4 squares sort of next to each other, and it's got breakout rooms written underneath it. If you click on that icon, you'll get a whole list of different breakout rooms that you can go into. They're all named with the different names of the projects. So based on what you liked, you can remember the name or look at the name on the slide and then jump into that room and speak to the students who were the designers. And I think we're going to be in the breakout rooms for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to bring you back in and ask for a little bit of discussion around some questions.
Perfect, thank you, John. Yeah, I've discovered that I am in the right slide. You're right. Just 2 very quick notes. So one is, and this is a sort of legal and technical thing, but it's worth saying because it is being recorded. The project, which has got a little bit of Bulb branding on it, was initiated by people from Bulb, but they've had no involvement since the company went to administration. So please sort of don't sort of ignore any sort of branding and things there. And then the second thing to mention is that there was one project here which didn't have a video because it's so new and so live that they haven't yet made a film for it. But this is the INC2 project, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning. So this is the one where they're looking to build a blockchain service to help people to work out their supply chains and how to decarbonize those chains. And yeah, fantastically, it's in quite a stiff competition. It's got through to the final round of the Terracotta Design Lab that Johnny Ive has been organising with the Heir to the Throne. So those are the different projects that we have. Yeah, make a note of those, maybe sort of try to visit 1 or 2. And as well as talking about the projects, these are some of the questions that are on our minds. So for the last 15 minutes or so of the session, these are some things we might raise as areas to debate with everybody. The first is where in our practice do we and don't we think about threats to the planet? So we have some briefs which are all about carbon, for instance, but where are we actually thinking about this on other projects as well? How is it experienced? How is it thought about? How is it acted upon? How is it talked about differently? We're doing this work in London, but with people from all around the world. Actually, our view of climate change in a UK project can be very narrow. How can we think about this differently from different perspectives? And then the last two questions, what are the strengths and the limitations of service design as a way of tackling these challenges? And I've talked about some of the strengths, but what are the other strengths that you'd recognise, and what are the problems? And lastly, what do we all need to do to change? And we think we're actually having to change very quickly, and we're very aware there's lots of challenges, but what do we need to learn to do differently? What do we need to immerse ourselves that we don't know about now in order to be better designers for this overwhelming problem? So those are some questions if they've helped to prompt even more discussion in the rooms. So yeah, in terms of practicalities, 15 minutes or so, go into a room, stay there for 15 minutes, go into a room, go somewhere else. You can leave and come out very, very easily. So in a second, John will open them up and you can just go in and choose which room you want to go into, but just leave, come back to the main room and then go to another one. And any questions now, either ask, put it in the chat, or wait in this main room and John and I can talk you through it. But yeah, go and find out more about the projects. They're fantastic. So I hope you enjoy the next 15 minutes and we'll see you just before the hour. John, do you say if there's anything else in terms of opening up the rooms or going into?
No, they're all open now, so people can feel free to migrate and move into the rooms.
Brilliant. And if anybody's feeling nervous about going to rooms or just wants to get on with something for 10 minutes and rejoin us at the end, you're very welcome to come back at that point. If you've got questions about which room was which, just let us know.
Excuse me, Matt, may I ask a question?
Of course, yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I want to honor all of your ancestors, my ancestors, and the ancestors on the lands that we're speaking from at this moment. And I'm curious if anyone in your group or your leaders have considered using this powerful tool to address indigenous climate justice, environmental justice, with the idea that if we protect indigenous lands and allow for indigenous people to tend to them, that it would make a significant impact on climate change. It's not a monetary angle, but it's more of a global life-changing angle. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's such a rich and interesting area for sure. I mean, I think one of my personal frustrations with a lot of the way that the climate is talked about it is it's from a very technological and very technocratic point of view, or we can just solve this with this clever invention. And I think, first of all, that may not be the best way to solve things, but it also allows us to carry on perpetrating quite a lot of the sort of other injustices in the world. And I think it also misses the way that we can revisit a lot of the ways that we're living by sort of thinking about our relationship with nature and thinking about this idea that we're at the center of the planet. So absolutely, I think we've been quite aware of that as we've been looking at these projects and the first things within the lab, that they are quite UK centric. Quite a lot of them are quite technocentric as well. But in some of the work I've been doing, I do a lot of work around international aid, and so quite a lot of the work I've been doing has been looking, for instance, at sort of farming in different parts of the world and looking at knowledge of the land or looking at knowledge of weather. And I'm by no means an expert in indigenous knowledge. It's something I'm really interested in and researched a little bit. But I've certainly sort of seen enough in terms of actually the kinds of knowledge which is stored within communities, in terms of how you actually sort of use those resources better, but also just a way of thinking about the relationship between people and the world, which in my narrow experience of indigenous communities is that there is often a much stronger appreciation of how connected we are to those things, which has been lost in capitalist society. So no, I mean, it's an area which I think is underexplored in the work we're showing today, but which is personally fascinating. And I'd love to know more about. If that's an area you're working in, I would love to hear more about your knowledge and expertise.
Wonderful. So maybe we can connect offline, because I believe that. So you have a powerful tool that can address any problem, it seems like, and find creative solutions. And I don't think that you specifically need to have the knowledge, but you have an amazing system. So by collaborating with indigenous leaders, we could come up with a wonderful way of approaching this that would make dramatic impact. So maybe if I'll put my email in the chat, if you can contact me, and then we can collaborate further, if that's interests you.
I would love to. That sounds incredibly exciting. Yeah, no, I'd love to. I mean, it's really interesting, listening to what you're saying as well, that both Judah, who's on the call, I think, but is in charge of one of the other labs. He and I are both really interested in asset-based community development. So it sounds like you're a fan as well. Yeah, the whole premise of starting with the knowledge that already exists and working with that rather than trying to impose solutions from the outside. So yeah, I think if could you tell me a little bit about what you're doing, or
sure,
where you're?
Yeah, and also I'm cognizant of there's a bunch of participants. I don't want to take up too much time. If there's other questions, maybe we can let those go through, and if there's more time, I can share. It's up to you. You're managing, but I want to be considerate of others.
Oh, thank you. I think, John, am I right? There's only a few of us who are in the main room still. So, yeah. No.
I think please go ahead.
Okay, so I've approached this from a shamanic, heart-centered approach of listening to my heart and then using my shamanic spirits to guide me on how to approach this. And what we've come up with is this massive dream of transcontinental indigenous climate justice advocacy. So the idea is that on each continent, there's a coalition of indigenous leaders that advocate for themselves around indigenous rights, indigenous knowledge, indigenous concerns to the environmental policy makers on that continent. So the African Union, the European Union, ASEAN, and so on. And then the coalition extends further across continents to advocate for global indigenous rights, knowledge, and concerns to bodies like the United Nations, commercial environmental policy influencers. It's a big task. I don't know how to do it, but I don't think it's being done. And I think it'll make a significant difference. And so then, to give an example, the indigenous leaders of Vanuatu have filed a case to the ICJ, International Criminal Justice Court, on the protection of their waters. Maybe it's possible that the Malagasy, the indigenous leaders from Madagascar, may not be aware of this tool, but by collaborating, by the Vanuatu through this network, collaborating with each other, sharing not so much indigenous knowledge, but practical, because each area has their own indigenous knowledge. They don't need assist on indigenous knowledge. What we need help is on how to advocate for ourselves. And so then they can tell them, I guess, hey, look, this is what we did. Maybe you could try this. And maybe they can. And then, in addition to that, the Vanuatu leaders can join the Malagasy leaders to advocate to the African Union on behalf of the Malagasys. And then this could be done across biosphere sections. The Arctic people have this type of collaboration. The rainforest people have this type of collaboration. The arid land people, and so on. And I think this would be a really powerful tool to really empower indigenous people to advocate, and not only to advocate for themselves, but to raise awareness to others like you in business, private, and be like, wow, how can we help to advocate? But starting there, this is what my helping spirits have guided me toward, based on my heart wanting to make a difference. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Clive, sorry.
No, I was just, it's really interesting what you're saying. And there was actually a design conference alongside COP26, and you can find it online at Design for Planet, and it was the Design Council. And what was interesting about that was there was a portion of speakers from indigenous countries, and some really amazing studies about, you know, indigenous people have for a long time been reusing, remaking, living in harmony with nature in a way that we've lost in the West. Completely agree with you. And there's a lot to be relearned. I think your last point about sharing that and building on that body of knowledge that hasn't been put in one place, you know, in a sense, that's what we're trying to do with our Liveable Planet thing, is have a place people can come and find information, share the kind of tools and the methods that we have. So I'm really delighted that you've kind of, it's resonated with you. That's great.
Yeah.
I think you're bringing a nice kind of, you know, we need to remember to look elsewhere and not only look. We've got some problems here helping a population go on a transition to a very different way of life. But at the same time, we can learn again from people around the world who have a lot to teach us. So I think it's really interesting what you're saying.
Thank you. And then what was the name of that website so I can check that out?
Yeah,
the Design Council.
If you put in Design for Planet, it was a whole day of speeches. And if you look through some of those speeches, you'll see that there's a few dealing with the issue of indigenous. I can't remember exactly who it was, but you should be able to see the list. Yeah. And there was a really nice talk about how much we can learn, mostly in terms of Africa and Indian indigenous people.
Wonderful. And I'm also open, from your perspective, your expertise, any tips you might give me to practically implement it, to pursue this.
Yeah. It sounds, I must admit, I'm so glad that you joined us. I mean, about 10 years ago, I tried to set up something on a reasonably small scale, connecting community organisers in different parts of the world. So mainly in Brazil, South Asia and East Africa. And I had a sort of small epiphany where I realised that somebody in an area in northern Brazil was solving exactly the same problem as somebody in Nairobi. And I was getting people to talk to each other and share knowledge, as you described. And also I found it very hard because people were so busy doing their own things. Actually connecting people up was very hard. And I think the challenge of how much you were using existing technology versus using your own platforms as well was the other thing which I sort of really struggled with. So I'm not sure how useful that sort of knowledge is, but I have got some experience of trying to do something similar, which I'd be really happy to talk through. And I think the other thing, I don't know what stage you're at as well, but I mean, you'll notice that a lot of the projects here are student-led, and we sort of do look to sort of build partnerships with people who are doing interesting things. So yeah, we'd be sort of happy to sort of talk about sort of ways you might be able to call on our knowledge, sort of like either with students or with faculty, because yeah, it completely talks to what we're trying to do. I think one of the other things we're really concerned about is that we think this knowledge is so valuable, as we've been saying, but there's also potential for it to become a very extractive relationship where people in London go and learn a lot of things, make use of it, and don't really sort of give very much back, or sort of don't really engage very deeply with the people who they're getting that knowledge from. So I think that's something that we're really keen to explore properly. Is like how do you set up a knowledge exchange which is respectful and equally rewarding for everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Richard. And so the initial kind of overarching I guess, vision or mission for this would be that indigenous people are advocating for themselves to policymakers. So it's not so much about sharing indigenous knowledge. It's more about saying, hey, look, we indigenous people have been taking care of the land for millennia. There's large swaths of land. Let's just use the Amazon, for example, where it's being extracted. Please allow us, kind of back off, allow us to continue nurturing the land. That's like the main push.
Yeah.
And then from there, wherever it's appropriate, share knowledge that's not, appropriated, that it's used in a dignified way. But the main thing is, hey, there's already rules in the books. There's already promises made. Follow through on those, and then so on.
Yeah.
But I definitely, and I really appreciate your heart around this and your sensitivity around. I can see that you've thought a lot about this. So I look forward to following up with you whenever you have a moment. I put my email in the chat.
Oh, fantastic! Cool. Yeah, we'll say that for sure. That's brilliant. Yeah. I don't know if he's here, but Javi, who joined us earlier, is based in Kenya, and he's looking at doing research, possibly with people at Harvard, about land use and sort of changing patterns of land use, which I think touches on some indigenous cultures in northern Kenya as well. So yeah, I'll just sort of check whether he's in the chat as well. But I'll keep thinking about people we could connect you with as well. It sounds like a brilliant conversation.
Wonderful. And so I'm in the Pasquayaki Tohono O'odham lands, what are currently known as Tucson, Arizona, in what is known as Southwest United States or Turtle Island. So we have a time zone difference, but we're here now, so we can definitely find a time that works for both of us to continue.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. I'm so pleased that you've joined us, and I'm just looking at the time in terms of whether you have the chance to nip into a room. We might.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Maybe.
Any way I can help. You've been great for me, so tell me what I can do. And yes.
I think we're going to wrap up in 2 minutes, but if you want to join, almost randomly join one of the rooms, I'm sure you'll have a conversation.
Do you send me, or do I go to
you can select your own room. So yeah, if you click at the top. And John, what do you think? Should we send out a message just saying?
Probably only a couple of minutes.
Should we say 3 minutes and then we'll bring people back together. There's a few other people who are in the main room. Is there anybody else who has questions they want to ask? It could be a very practical one, like where is the button to get into a room?
Yeah, I have the same question.
John, it's at the top, isn't it, on most screens?
To join a room, you need to click the breakout rooms button on the bottom, which has 4 little squares in it. But to be honest, we're going to bring people back in about 2 minutes anyway, so you may choose not to.
Maria or George, who else is here? Or Lily, has anybody else got a question or want to chat before?
No, thank you. I'm just following along whilst not interacting with my computer. So I do exist. I am here.
There you go. I love the phones on the back of the.
This is my first smartphone. Remember these Sega little French things? Yeah. Sorry, this is my first smartphone. This is my first ever phone. This Sega, yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. I used to do lots of work with Nokia years ago. So like, I've got a massive collection of these things knocking around as well.
I wasn't really, it wasn't quite in the Nokia crowd as a 13-year-old or whatever. I just had to settle for this thing.
Yeah. The 3310 was probably quite an expensive purchase.
Yeah.
Well, I was head of design at Orange, so I was on the network side.
So I've got a whole load in a box here. The K750i, these Sony Ericsson ones. These are the ones that I normally reference all the time because I do all this like physical haptic interaction design and that sliding. If you remember that thing where you open and close the shutter on the back, like.
Yeah.
What do we have now? We have this, right? This little thing that we fiddle with back and forth. But it was those old Sony Ericssons that I think were the little nipple as well navigation thing. These were the real pinnacle for me of like hardware interaction on these phones.
Did you have the thing where you could put a camera onto the phone? Didn't Sony make one where the camera was a separate piece and you'd have to jam it on?
One of the first camera phones, wasn't it? Sony Ericsson?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was that whole Motorola concept where you add different shells to the back, but this is a lot more recent. I don't know that maybe. Sorry, Clive, were you saying you know that this one is?
I was an expert witness in a court case, and I had to go and research the whole history of mobile phones for it a couple of years ago. So I know just about every single one.
This one for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this design classic, this little thing in the middle.
That was a perfect phone.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring people back in though.
Yeah, just stop us having this conversation.
Sorry, I'll
I think that's the best detour. I love it. Okay, how are we doing? I think everyone's back or on their way back. Excellent. Well, I hope the conversations were as interesting as the ones that we had in the main room with people here. Does anybody who, maybe if we could start with anybody who's from outside the RCA or at least outside of the service design course, does anybody want to start off with any reflections on the conversations they had in the rooms? I've got some questions on my mind, but maybe anywhere that you want to start. Any reflections on those conversations from someone? And do put sort of comments and thoughts and questions and things into the chat as well if you like. But yeah, we'd be in the morning session. We had a few people who'd obviously not seen the work before, sort of worked in different places, commenting on the conversations they had with students. Is anybody happy just to sort of share a few thoughts on those conversations, maybe? I'm using silence as my first rhetorical trick to see if anybody will speak. Okay. In which case, I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions, and if anybody wants to talk around them, then I'd be fascinated to know what you think. But the first is, a lot of these projects were based in the UK, but were done by people internationally. What do you think the work you've seen says about the way that people see the planet differently in different countries around the world? Any thoughts on that?
Hello.
Hi. Hey, welcome.
My name is Shuruk, and I'm a Moroccan alumni from RCA. I was in visual communication. What I wanted to ask is, well, yes, I'm from Morocco and I come here, live in the Netherlands, but I do see that the issue is also international in the sense that global warming is not happening only in the West. And it's quite interesting to see how, yes, a lot of the projects are mainly done in the UK, but if we keep the focus on the West, how can we actually like solve the real issues that are happening elsewhere due to colonial times, due to a lot of the state of the world. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a whole question of how solving problems of climate are bound up with solving other problems of social injustice is such an important one, and I think often gets really overlooked. Is anybody maybe from the students as well who wants to sort of comment to that point or to expand on it in any way? Because I think in these projects there hasn't been necessarily a sort of an obvious global lens, but I think in some of the projects people have looked at issues of class or sort of social injustice and who has access to these things, or sort of I know some of the projects with Adidas as well looked at what it means to be a maker or somebody who's involved would be very different in different cultures. Linda, you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying sort of like global warming looks very different in the rest of the world as it does to the West as well. And I think one of the things that I found, especially when I started doing the research, is that when they did try to manufacture in the West, there were some issues that became apparent in terms of like the cost of producing them in a sustainable way. So then they moved these technologies to Asia as well. But then it was also the process of creating the sustainable systems, which also cut off a lot of different sort of like suppliers and people who could actually contribute to that. So there's also another issue of how sustainability is viewed, because I think everybody wants to create an IP around sustainability, but really it has to be something that is done together, because whatever happens to the earth affects everybody who's involved in it. So I think brands are starting to see this as well. I think they're starting to open their eyes and see that, you know what, to make a real change, we have to get everybody involved. And this means also addressing other issues that exist. So things like social capital, and making sure that people who are outside of this market also have access to these tools and these facilities, and their voice is also heard in the process of change as well. Because I think around the world, you know, the terrain is very different, and the different ways of nurturing and looking after the earth. And I think companies, they are beginning to do this. They will begin to sort of like integrate the sort of like lo-fi technologies and also start embracing what they are good at and finding ways to work together. So the shift is happening, but it's quite slow, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. There's so much in that, and I think the phrase that people are looking for IP around this is such a good way of sort of skewering what's going on. This sort of desire I still want to own this sort of process of solving the issue rather than working together. I'm sort of aware of time, but maybe sort of one more, just such a sort of rich topic that you've opened up, maybe sort of one more comment or thought on this area before we have to wrap up.
Hi, yeah. Hi, I'm Simbi. I'm a service designer from Fjord, part of Essential Interactive. Something that, really interesting work and really nice to see all of the students' work. Something that came to mind was I had a really interesting conversation with, I think it's Vicky and Shelley, I hope I'm getting the names right, in the TIMO project. And they mentioned that there's a real sort of change in attitude when it comes to EVs for petrol drivers who tend to have more of a bigger fear of the EV lifestyle in comparison to EV drivers or people who currently own an EV who tend to see it more as an opportunity for extra me time. So I think when I then think about the economic factors around the world, you can quite easily see how different parts of the world, perhaps in the West, may have differing attitudes towards new technologies like EVs and how that can sort of change the sort of sustainability market and who has access to what, and more importantly, who actually wants access to what as well. So that was just a thought from an interesting conversation.
Yeah, that's really so. Yeah, well, people who would actually want access as well. That sounds really interesting. So,
yeah, just yeah, it was just a factor, sort of piggybacking off of their research, but they said that a lot of when it comes to charging time, the sort of charging time tax, the fact that it takes often around 2 to 4 hours to charge your electric vehicles, a lot of petrol drivers feel that see that as a big inconvenience and think, what am I going to do with the time? So whether it then raises the question of if that was actually accessible to, if they had access to an EV car, would they even maybe want to drive it? So I think we often assume that sustainable design and the design that's best for the planet is always going to be what people want by default. But we have to sometimes as designers not to say make them want it, but make it desirable enough for them to want to use it.
yeah, I think that question of like the desirability or making things the right choice desirable is a big issue in a lot of the Adidas work as well, as how far can you sort of manipulate desire back again into more positive ways, having manipulated desire into destructive behavior for many decades. I think the question of time is fascinating as well. I was talking to somebody who's very involved in this area who felt his argument was that time is actually the real issue around the planet and around climate. It's our sense of accelerated time and our sense of trying to do things quickly is actually the sort of core of all the bad decisions we make. And if we can sort of review how we see time and think about time differently, that would solve a lot of those issues. But speaking of which, though, I am about to run out of that precious commodity. And I'm also aware, Clive, you've got some thoughts which would help people today to find some of the content that we've talked about, because I know most of you probably only been to like one room or sort of 2 rooms or seen some of it, but if you're keen to hear about other projects or stay in touch with students, then there's a way to do that, am I right?
Yeah, so I'll just share my final few slides before we sign off for the evening. But thanks everybody, thanks for your great comments, by the way, and thank you for, let's see, hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. Hopefully you can see that. And thanks for some really interesting, there have been some really interesting projects here. I was particularly closely involved with the EV charging one, and we did a lot of research on that as well, by the way. Certain people were really embracing that time that they got back. But you can go and see the work of all these projects and all the other challenge labs as well on our website, the simplest URL you could wish for, rcaservicedesign.com. It's an archive, actually, of all the shows. I was just looking through it just now, right back to the WIP show of 2020, and will continue to be the archive of all the work that the students do here. But it's got the projects on this show, and when you go to that website, you will notice that by the projects, there's a little set up a quick conversation, get in touch with the designers link. And that will take you to either a Calendly or an email link where you can quickly get in touch with the designers and say, can we talk about this? Can you tell me more? And, you know, I'd really love you all to go and talk to 1 or 2 designers of the work that you've seen today and hear more about it. It's been a pretty tough couple of years for everybody, but especially for students. As I mentioned at the beginning, this cohort of students had their first year completely online. So please go and talk to them. Tomorrow we have some more events. Today this is the 3rd event we've had looking at Liveable Planet. Tomorrow we go into social impact. We have a conversation with Amelia, an alumni from a couple of years ago who's now working with Barking and Dagenham. And she's going to talk to us about her experience being a service designer inside that organization, solving the problems and challenges there. And then we'll have the equivalent of this event at lunchtime for time zones that need to access at lunchtime. And this 5 o'clock session, so 1 o'clock tomorrow and 5 o'clock tomorrow. Both those sessions will be joined by Justin Cook from the Centre of Complexity at Rhode Island School of Design, which we're very delighted about. And then on Wednesday, we talked to Nikos and Nafisa, who have just received their first $500,000 for their startup Quirk project. They started here at the RCA Service Design course, went on to be incubated in the Innovate RCA incubator, and now they're out there turning it on, and I'm a customer, and it reminds me every day how to manage my money better. So we'll be looking at life services that we did with EY Seren and nationwide in the projects on Wednesday at 12 and 5. So as I say, come along to these, listen to the students, talk to them. They're a good bunch of people. We owe it to them. They've been through this year, their first year on the course completely online. They're back in the studio now. They're getting ready for their graduation in June. This is the class of 2022. They will be going out there and transforming the world when they leave this course. Make a connection with them now and watch their space. I think they're going to do great, great things. So thank you very much to all the students and everyone who's been here for this event. I'll hand back to Richard now in case he's got any last words to set you on your way. But thank you for joining us, and thanks for some really fascinating project work and fascinating comments. Thanks very much. Back to you, Richard.
I only have thank you to say. Thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, especially everybody who came from outside the RCA. It's been wonderful to meet you. So thank you, and have an excellent evening or the rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Richard, for your time, and everybody else. Appreciate it. See you. All the best.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.